Welcome to week 8 of Business Skills and Social Work. Let's get started. This week we'll look at East chapters 8 and 10 and Brown's part 4. So we start here with the East leadership for the helping professions, looking again at what it means to be a head learner. And this part specifically, we're looking at the change theory, systems thinking information, the stages of change in Hart Stewart, and creating a new mental model on resilience. I want to look briefly at the Hart Stewart part, the stages of change, and just remembering that each week we build in the motivational interviewing stages of change in more depth so that you're able to understand this. So this chapter that he presents here, I'm sure will make a lot of sense to you because you're already delving into this. When we look at an organizational change theory, each organization sort of has their opinion or their thought of what they're changing, right? So in this change theory, you look at what is the sense of urgency? What is the most important need? So I'll look at, say, in a homeless organization, and their sense of urgency is changing the way people experience homelessness. And so it would be about creating a team that would guide this change for this homeless shelter, developing a vision, communicating that vision, involving people in the change effort that are able to make a difference. For instance, we might look at what policies are in place, what organizations has buildings that we could use for this shelter. What are some short-term wins that we would be examining? How do we consolidate change and create this momentum? And how do we institutionalize the change so it's not just that we have homeless shelters, but that we are changing homelessness? So organizations each should have their change theory. Think about where you are at your internship and what is their theory of change. We talked this week about journeying forward in East's books, and he's talking about the journey, becoming part of that journey. Like, what are you doing to become the agency or become the type of leader that you want to be? Where are your values integrated into the process? What competencies are you developing to make certain that people are equipped to perform the task? And how are you leading with your heart and soul? Leading with the heart and soul continues with personal transformation, that understanding who we are and our areas of growth and how we are change agents. So the more we learn about ourselves and our values, the more we are able to bring those authentically to the table and change where we serve. Lowen talks about levels of change. He says there's the unfreeze and movement and refreezing. So, unfreezing is when a leader group creates opportunities to set a stage for change. Movement, of course, is when the change begins to take place and you respond to the needs, and those responses are implemented into practices. And then refreeze is integrating the change into the way things are done. So it's remolding them and making them frozen, right? Making them real policies and procedures, making them real practices that make sense. So when we look briefly at stages of behavior change, when we want to go to different levels of change, we have to think about where people are. So pre-contemplation, recognizing that we see a problem, but they may not have the desire to change. Contemplation, know that they know that there's a need for change, but they may be ambivalent and not ready to move forward. Preparation is when we begin to see change take action. They may be making some decisions or trying out some new things that show that they're headed in a new direction towards change. action is taking out a new behavior for a while and trying out some thoughts, actions, and feelings. And then the maintenance is how do we sustain the change? And then examining also a reality that on these stages of changes, we're elevating up that there may be periods of relapse. And what are we as leaders doing to help people stay on path and transform? When we talk about motivational interviewing this week, we're looking at inquiry and advocacy skills processing. Inquiry skills are about uncovering um, thinking and assumptions, right? Helping people to deep dig into questions. For example, maybe, can you help me understand your thinking here? Can you help me know how you came to this conclusion? So, not saying that the person didn't arrive at a good place, but inquiring about where actions came from, drawing out that reasoning. What does this mean for you? Can you give me an example? So, using skills that inquire about the person. Advocacy skills is about making your own reasoning explicit and explaining your assumptions. The opposite of inquiry, saying, here's my view and here's how I arrived at it. And then encouraging them to explore how your view relates to them, inquiring, advocating for your own view, for them to give their view. How does that sound to you? Does it make sense to you? How could I better understand it to help you understand what I'm saying? And the balance between inquiry and advocacy is about encouraging different views and helping others, including yourself, to see things differently. We're going to move to our Dare to Lead. This week we're a little out, did them a little bit out of order. But integrity is choosing courage over comfort. It's choosing what's right over what's fun, fast, or easy. And it's practicing your values, not just possessing them. Ow. On this, Brene takes us back to the act of practice, recognizing our values and living them out. She also, during the chapter, talked about the braving inventory, understanding that the braving inventory is about looking courageously at boundaries and respecting boundaries of others and being reliable, doing what we say, knowing our competencies and limitations, living a life of accountability, not sharing information or experiences that are not yours to share, living with integrity, choosing courage over comfort, and this non judgment awareness of yourself and others, being a curious observer without judging. So, inquiring without already presupposing how someone arrived at something. So, doing our breath rumbles, we really learn how to extend this grace and this brave, courageous self compassion to ourselves and others. Because when we have the courage to walk into our story and own it, we get to write the ending, right? And when we don't own our story, so when we aren't looking at our failures, our setbacks, and our hurts, they own us. We're always living non bravely, not courageous enough to recognize mistakes. And when this happens, we begin to offload our hurts. So there's a whole list of offloading hurts that Brene includes in the chapter. I want you to consider looking at some of those and what is your primary way to offload hurt? Do you use anger and blame? So do you bounce the hurt? Do you stockpile it and you keep packing down the hurt? Do you umbrage it where you're not giving yourself permission to experience these emotions and pretending everything is okay? Like, what's your primary sense of offloading hurt? We all have one. And the more we become aware of what it is, the more we can become true to not offload. I like here she says the most dangerous story we wake up are the narratives that diminish our inherent worthiness. We must reclaim the truth about our lovability, our divinity, and our creativity. In her words, she's saying we must be transformational leaders and lead with our heart, mind, and making meaning of our soul. Recognizing what the story is that we tell ourselves, what's the one that we make up, and what is the truth. And trusting ourselves in this process, finding out who we are, and rumbling with this self trust, rumbling with the boundaries, recognizing if you respected what was clear to you, and did you create or communicate that in a clear way? Are you reliable? Can you count on yourself to be committed to yourself and your values? Are you accountable? Do you appropriately share? What's your non judgment? Just constantly looking at your story and reckoning with the things that need examined, knowing that we're emotionally hooked, and recognizing when we're hooked in those emotions, when we need to rumble with that, when we need to look at that first draft of the story and consider rewriting that emotion, developing our emotions, understanding what's occurring in our bodies and our thinking and our beliefs and our actions, so we can revolutionize how we respond to things within the work environment, showing up as a transformational and daring leader. Our personal growth principle this week is the law of pain, and it says good management of bad experiences leads to great growth. And it's a matter of being introspective, looking inside ourselves and recognizing that even bad experiences teach us good things. There's something in each experience if we can rumble with it to recognize that we've learned about ourselves and others. Maxwell's knowledge of bad experiences is about turning pain into gain and taking this positive stance on this happened. I can't necessarily change it, but there's a value to this. What can I learn from it? And what good choices can I make after learning from this bad experience? When we look at our professional skill growth for this week, it's talking about interactions that you've had with your boss, right? And if knowing that your goal is to adjust your own approach to better meet your boss's work style, how do you answer these questions? Of looking at how your boss's style may be different for yours, what situation is that difference most evident, what circumstances does the relationship run the most smoothly, and what can you do to minimize the friction and maximize the compatibility? Rumbling with this, recognizing where you might offload hurt with your boss and seeking to find the pain and the gain. So this week for motivational interviewing, we're looking at sources of focus. There's the focus on the client, the setting, and clinical experience. Recognizing that people come through the door with presenting problems. So looking at the client and seeing how do I place my focus on what is presenting. The setting has to do with agencies, and each agency has a setting of the specific focus that they're taking place. I talked a little bit about the homeless shelter. They're focused on fair housing and having safe housing for someone. Maybe it's a counseling agency that's focused on the mental health of children specifically, but what is the setting of the focus? And then how do I bring my clinical expertise to the table of perceiving based on the client's focus and the setting, how I go about integrating a focus of change and help, hope, and healing with the client. Am I directing that focus where I determine the focus rooted in my agenda or the agenda of the agency? Do I set up a following style of focus where the focus solely depends on client priorities, or a guiding focus where the focus, momentum, and content are mutually forged utilizing the client priority? priorities, and constraints of the agency and setting, and the expertise of the clinician. So, of the three focusing styles, guiding is the one that leads to transformation. This week, we go back again, looking at that difficult relationship with a coworker, just asking the same questions and assessing within yourself if anything has changed based on the relationship that you have with the person. So that was a quick overview for this week. Until next time, this is Dr. Sherry signing off.